There is a room inside one of the most famous palaces on Earth that officially does not exist. It appears on no architectural blueprint, no staff directory, no royal inventory ever released to the public. And for years, not a single person inside those gilded walls dared to acknowledge it out loud. But one night, in the middle of a thunderstorm, Prince William found it. And what he discovered behind that hidden door would shake the British royal family to its very foundation. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to the quiet hours of the palace when most of the world is asleep. The corridors of Windsor and Buckingham are never truly silent. There are always guards, always cleaners, always someone moving through the long shadowed hallways, doing the kind of work that history never records. And it was exactly these invisible people who first noticed something was wrong. The guards who saw too much. It started with the night shift. At around 2 a.m. on a bitter cold evening, a young royal guard named Harris was doing his standard patrol through the western wing of the palace. This particular section led directly into Queen Camilla's private quarters, and according to every official architectural plan stored in the palace management office, it contained nothing more than a structural wall system and a storage room for ceremonial items. Routine, unremarkable, completely safe. Except Harris saw something that night that didn't fit any of that. Through the narrow gap of a service corridor, he watched two members of Camilla's most trusted household staff straining against a trolley loaded with wooden crates wrapped tightly in black linen. They weren't using the main elevators. They were weaving deliberately around every camera angle, moving with the kind of practiced furtiveness that only comes from doing something many times before. Harris said nothing. He stood perfectly still and let them pass. But the image burned itself into his memory. Over the following weeks, other guards started sharing similar stories in hushed tones during shift changes. Pale golden lights flickering behind walls that were supposed to be solid. Sounds that didn't belong. The metallic click of brass locks, the soft rustle of old paper, and occasionally something that sounded disturbingly. The captain breaks his silence. The tipping point came late one night after an extended shift. A veteran captain of the Royal Guard, a man who had served the palace for over 2 decades, made a private and highly unusual request. He wanted to speak with William alone, off the record, with no witnesses and no documentation. In the dim light of William's private study, the captain recounted every detail. The crates, the camera blind spots, the sounds and the lights. He described the physical sensation of standing near that section of the wall. A chill that had nothing to do with temperature. A heaviness in the air that felt like the presence of something deliberately suppressed. He had said nothing for months, because loyalty to the institution was drilled into every fiber of his professional identity. But what he had seen had become impossible to carry alone. William thanked him, dismissed him quietly, and sat alone for a long time after he left. The palace had always been a labyrinth of concealed memory. William knew that better than almost anyone alive. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way that activated something in him that went far beyond royal protocol. He made a decision that night with no fanfare and no announcement. He would find out exactly what was behind that wall himself. The 3 a.m. window. Before he moved physically, William moved strategically. He spent hours in his private office with financial reports spread across his desk as cover, while his real attention was locked onto the digital schematics of the palace's internal security network. What he found confirmed everything and then some. Every single night, at exactly 3 a.m., the motion sensors and surveillance cameras in the corridor leading to Camilla's private quarters went dark. Not for a random amount of time. Precisely 15 minutes, then back online, as if nothing had happened. This was not a glitch. System glitches are irregular and unpredictable. This was a scheduled blackout, engineered deliberately to create a clean window of activity that would leave no trace on any monitoring record. The discovery sat in his chest like a cold stone. He began conducting quiet reconnaissance, walking those corridors at off hours, trailing his fingers along the cold stone walls, paying attention to textures and temperatures and anything that felt even slightly out of place. During one of these walks, accompanied by two advisors he trusted completely, men who had been with him since his military days, he stopped in front of the suspicious section of the western wing wall and studied the decorative Baroque pattern carved into the stone facing. It should have been perfect. He worked along the wall methodically, his fingertips tracing the gilded moldings inch by inch. Then, tucked behind a small carved relief of laurel branches, his fingers found it. A slight depression in the stone, barely larger than a thumbprint, completely invisible unless you were already searching for it. He pressed it firmly. A soft, dry click broke the silence of the corridor like a gunshot. The wall moved, not swinging outward like a door in a film, but sliding smoothly inward, revealing a narrow gap just wide enough for one person to enter sideways. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Whoever had built this had taken months perfecting the concealment. Even the wallpaper pattern continued seamlessly across the seam, which was why it had gone undetected for so long. A rush of air moved against William's face as the gap opened, dry and close, and layered with the smell of old paper, candle wax, and something else entirely. A faint trace of rose perfume so deeply familiar that his breath stopped in his throat and his eyes burned before he even understood why. He stood at the threshold for a long moment. He understood precisely what crossing it would mean. He stepped through anyway. The stone panel slid silently shut behind him. What the room held. There was no dust, no decay, no sense of a forgotten storage space left to gather cobwebs. Instead, the room was maintained with an almost obsessive precision. Every surface tended, every object placed with deliberate care. The scent of sandalwood and preserved antiques hung heavy in the sealed air. Oak shelves reached floor to ceiling along two walls, stacked with leather-bound files and bundles of letters tied with faded silk ribbons. William moved to a rosewood vanity table in the corner. His hands were not steady as they lifted the lid of the first velvet jewelry box. The diamonds and emeralds inside sent refracted light dancing across the dark walls in bursts of green and white fire. He recognized these pieces immediately, not vaguely, precisely. They were items that had glittered at state banquets on his mother's neck and wrists. Items the public believed were either secured in the crown jewels collection or had simply been lost in the chaos following Diana's death. They had not been lost. They had been collected. He moved through the room with... He sat down in an old leather armchair and worked through the files on the shelves. What emerged was a picture of something far beyond jealousy. There were records of asset transfers. Diana's belongings crossed off official royal inventories in cold red ink. Private directives instructing that Diana's personal items be excluded from royal exhibitions. Memos designed to ensure that the memory of the people's princess faded gradually and quietly from public consciousness, clearing the historical path for the woman who followed her. Every piece of jewelry locked in those velvet boxes was not being kept as a tribute. It was being kept as a trophy, and more importantly, as a form of control. If Camilla held these objects, no one else could display them. No one else could point to them and say, "These belong to Diana." The erasure was methodical, and it had been ongoing for years. William photographed everything. Every document, every diary page, every piece of jewelry. Each click of his phone camera felt like the sound of something irreversible being set into motion. When the first thin light of dawn began pressing through the palace's external windows, he rose, replaced every object exactly where he had found it, and stepped back through the hidden door into the corridor. He was not confused anymore. He was not even particularly angry in the way that makes a person loud. He was the kind of calm that only comes when a decision has been made completely, and finally, with no remaining room for doubt. The confrontation. He did not wait long. When he walked into Camilla's private drawing room, she was seated by the window with a teacup held in both hands, composed in the way that decades of aristocratic training produces. The moment she looked up and saw his face, not the face of a dutiful stepson paying a visit, but the face of someone who knew exactly what she had been hiding. The teacup clinked sharply against the saucer. William said nothing at first. He walked to the round table at the center of the room and placed two items on its surface: Diana's sapphire ring and a photograph from inside the hidden room. The composure Camilla had spent decades perfecting crumbled in approximately 3 seconds. Shock crossed her face, followed immediately by something that looked like sheer terror. The specific terror of someone who has kept a secret for years and suddenly understands it is completely gone. She seemed to age visibly in the space of a single moment, her posture folding inward under the weight of what she saw on that table. What followed was not a dramatic shouting match. It was something quieter and far more devastating. Camilla began to speak in a low, trembling voice, and what came out was a confession built from equal parts obsession and calculation. She said she had not kept Diana's belongings out of jealousy alone. She had done it out of a desperate need to control the one thing that had always threatened to overshadow her: Diana's image. The ghost of the previous wife had haunted every room she entered, every event she attended, every headline she was ever part of. Locking away these objects was, in her mind, the only way to finally possess the space she had spent her entire life trying to occupy. She had wanted ownership of the narrative, and she had very nearly achieved it.